Today we're going to add decimals. Just like when adding whole numbers, we have to make sure that our place value columns are in line before we start to add. We have to add common place value values, if that makes any sense. Let's see what I'm talking about here. We have 7 and 86 hundredths plus 2 and 91 hundredths as our first problem. So when we line this up vertically to get ready to add, we have to make sure that when we copy 2 and 91 hundredths, the decimal point is in line with the decimal point here in 7 and 86 hundredths. The 2 is in front of the decimal there, the 2 goes in the ones place there. We have 91 hundredths, so here when we copy it, we make sure we copy carefully the 9 in the tenths place and the 1 in the hundredths place. So now we're all set to add. To make sure we don't forget, let's bring that decimal point down first. And then we simply add 6 hundredths plus 1 hundredth would be 7 hundredths. 8 tenths plus 9 tenths would be 17 tenths. Well, that means we're going to have to carry. Put a 7 here in the tenths place and we carry the 1 because 10 of those tenths can be put together to make a whole. 1 plus 7 is 8. 8 plus 2 is 10. So the sum would be 10 and 77 hundredths. On our next problem, 4 and 3 tenths plus 2 and 49 hundredths. We copy 4 and 3 tenths, and then when we line up 2 and 49 hundredths, we have to make sure the decimal points are in line. The 2 is in front of the decimal, so we put it here in the ones place in front of the decimal. 49 hundredths is behind the decimal, so we make sure that we put 49 hundredths behind the decimal there. Because 4 and 3 tenths only had 1 decimal place, and 2 and 49 hundredths had 2 decimal places, there is an empty spot here in this first add end. Just as we did in the past when we have an empty spot behind a decimal place, all we have to do is put a 0 to hold that place. Once we do that, we bring the decimal down so we don't forget. Then we add 0 plus 9 is 9, 3 plus 4 is 7, 2 plus 4 is 6. So the sum would be 6 and 79 hundredths. In our next problem, we have 9 and 9 hundredths plus 4 and 7 tenths. Just glancing, we can already see we have different numbers of decimal places. So we need to be careful when we're lining these up. 9 and 9 hundredths plus 4 and 7 tenths. The 4 goes in front of the decimal, the 7 behind the decimal. We add a 0 in that empty place. Now we're all set to add. We bring the decimal point down. 9 plus 0 is 9. 0 plus 7 is 7. 9 plus 4 is 13. So the sum would be 13 and 79 hundredths. A mistake that people sometimes make, and I'm showing you this so that you can avoid it, would be to line up numbers and push everything to the right like we used to do with just whole numbers. If you try to do that, you're trying to add hundredths to tenths. That won't work. Make sure you line your decimal places up and add the zeros in the empty spaces when necessary. The next problem is 61 hundredths plus 3 and 17 hundredths. Both of these have the same number of decimal places. That makes the lining up a little bit easier. Make sure the decimal's in line, and we write 3 and 17 hundredths. Bring the decimal point down, and we add 1 plus 7 is 8, 6 plus 1 is 7, 0 plus 3 is 3. Now in this example, you'll notice that the 4 does not have a decimal in it at all. And we have to line it up and add it to 6 and 7 tenths. So we're going to have to put our 4 and then think about where we would line up the 6 for 6 and 7 tenths. Well, the 4 we know is in the ones place because it's 4 wholes. The 6 is in the ones place, it's right in front of the decimal. So the 6 would line up right under the 4 with the 7 tenths behind it. So that would tell us we would have to add a decimal and 0 behind the 4 to line up our place value columns. Remember, just like it's okay to add zeros behind the last decimal place in a number, you can add a decimal and zero behind any whole number and not change its value. It's kind of like saying $4 is the same as $4 written that way. Okay. Now, we're set to add. We bring our decimal point down. 0 plus 7 is 7. 4 plus 6 is 10. 10 and 7/10 would be the sum. On this problem, we have 3 8/100 plus 5. Again, we're adding a decimal number to a whole number. We have to make sure when we line the 5 up under 3 8/100 that we're putting the 5 in the ones place. We will add a decimal and zeros behind the 5 to fill in the extra decimal places. We bring the decimal down and we add 8 8/100. Now we have 13 2/10 plus 6, another decimal number plus a whole number. But this time our decimal number has 2 places in front of the decimal. It's 13. So we have to make sure we put the 6 in the correct place. The 6 is in the ones place. So we can think of it one of 2 ways. We can know that the 6 would have to go in the ones place under the 3. Or we can remember that we can add a decimal and 0 behind the 6 to even out the decimal places. Either way, the 6 ends up under the 3 in the ones column with the decimal 0 behind it. We bring the decimal down and we add 19 2/10. Here in our last example, we have 14 1/10 plus 2 6/100. Both numbers have 3 digits in them, but they're not in the same place value columns. So remember to keep the decimal point in line. If the 2 is in front of the decimal here in our original problem, we need to put the 2 in front of the decimal in this add-in as well. 6/100 needs to go behind the decimal. To even it out, we add a 0 here in the empty decimal place, bring the decimal down, and add